learning the value of $1. I found that it was easy for me to spend money back then instead of to save money. It was easy for me to get my check, spend it on makeup, shoes, clothes, and not realizing like, hey, Kiara, you worked a little over 80 hours to make that money that you're gonna spend in less than 5 minutes. Once I learned the value of $1 and how long it could take me to save this amount of money and make this amount of money with me working a regular 9 to 5 and stuff back then, I probably wouldn't have spent my money silly. And let me tell you, it took me until I was around 26 and a half years old to be like, hey, Carrie, you're gonna need some money in that savings account because you're gonna move out of your mom's one day, you're gonna need to fix your car again one day, or you're gonna need a new car. Things happen in the world. You might need an emergency fund for who knows what will happen. Till this day, I calculate all of my money. I only get paid once a month, and that is with YouTube. This is my full-time job, my only job. I don't have any other revenue coming in. I don't take up much sponsorships. I do have Amazon affiliate links, but that's like 30 bucks a month. So I just tie that into YouTube. So the money that I do get, I have to be careful with how I spend it and what I do with it. If I want it to grow in my savings, then you have to watch on how you spend that little money coming in. So I'm glad I learned that lesson when I was 26, finally sat down and realized like,
hey girl, you're spending too much money.
Because if I was still spending money like that, I probably wouldn't be here. I probably wouldn't be making videos like this. I probably would be very, very stressed out like I was back then, borrowing money off of any and everybody. Utilizing the online world for good. What I mean by this and how it kind of changed my life was I was using the online world as an escape of reality, kind of. Like the reality of my life back then was spending money stupidly, partying. I used to go to the club for years, like every weekend. I would go to the clubs all the time for like 3-4 years straight. And I was using the online world as in like how to look like Kim Kardashian, how to organize all my makeup, how to get more makeup, just not using it to my full advantage. And once I seen a video on minimalism and adapted this amazing lifestyle, I was like, all right, so you can use the online world for good. If it wasn't for me switching that mentality of like, all right, instead of looking up makeup tutorials, let me look up how to save more money or how to make more money or, you know, how to live with less. And with me switching that route with the online world, I switched my entire life around. So there is a very dark side to the online world. You just need to know how to navigate it and need to know how to use it to your full advantage. What worked for me might not work for you. I mean, obviously I got really intrigued by the whole minimalist lifestyle back in early 2017, and I just kept watching video after video, and after I watched those videos, I ended up going onto Pinterest and figuring out like, all right, how can I save money on my period? Okay, cool, I can use reusable period pads instead of purchasing your traditional disposable pads. All right, let me write that down. And I remember like taking notes as I'm reading these articles online, following these videos. I used to be a dishwasher for 8 years, and when it was my shift to do dishes, I had a little stand that I would just take notes, because if there was no dishes coming through, I had a little bit of spare time. And with that spare time I had at my old job, instead of me looking up makeup tutorials like I was, or like looking up how to basically waste my money, I was going the opposite route of how to save my money and just to become a better version of myself with me heading into my later 20s. Less is truly more. Now, I have talked about this little quote for years and I still stand by it till this day. For me, less is more in a lot of aspects. Material items, desserts. As much as I love sweets and would love to eat them every day, probably like 24 hours a day, it's not ideal. Sweets don't do anything for you when it comes to health and things like that. So I'm trying my best to watch what I put in my body nowadays and just realizing like, all right, I don't need to eat a full thing of cake in order for my sugar cravings to feel at ease. I can eat a small piece of cake because less is more when it comes to certain things like that in my life. And with me thinking this way, it has really changed on how I view certain things in my life, like the material things. I don't need a ton of clothes to feel good about myself. I don't need a lot of makeup to feel beautiful. And I think that this little quote can be different for everybody. Maybe less is more for you when it comes to cars. Maybe you had like 3-4 cars and you just downsize to just 1. You don't need 4. Maybe it's when it comes to furniture. Maybe you don't need all that furniture and you realize this. So less is more to you when it comes to furniture. Like, again, it's different for everybody, but for me, it was like material things, the desserts, and just like other things that I was doing too much of in order to feel a certain way. When if I just cut that in half, do less of that one thing that I was doing too much of, I would feel a lot less stressed out or feel a lot less down. I hope I'm making sense. I feel like I'm all over the place, but it's really hard to put in words what less is more, like what that means to you, because it can be different for everybody, like I've been saying. Work with what I have. This is a huge game changer. Working with what I have has literally changed my bank accounts forever. For a little quick example, in the kitchen the other day, we didn't have any tomato sauce, and I'm like, well, we have a big thing of tomatoes. Let me make our own tomato sauce instead of going out and buying tomato sauce when we have tomatoes at home. So I just sauteed the fresh tomatoes, add a cup of water, blended it, add some herbs, and then we had our own tomato sauce instead of leaving the house and spending more money that we didn't really need to spend on an item that we technically have in the house. Another good example is my phone. A lot of people like to upgrade their phones. For me personally, I work with what I have. I still have the iPhone XR. It works great. It still calls people, texts. I still use it for work. I use it for every thumbnail you guys see. I use it to answer comments. There's nothing wrong with this phone, even though it is considered really old in society. But I'm literally just working with what I have until it breaks or until I need to get a new one. And having this mentality of working with what I have has changed not just the way I think of things, but has really changed my bank account. Because before I would spend money that I didn't have on things I didn't need, because I could have worked with what I had in my bedroom at the time when I lived with my mom. Another little example of back then of what I could have done was I really liked bronzer. Like, this was back in like 2010 and 11 when bronzer was like in. I had all different shades of bronzer, and I could have used all those shades to use for like eyeshadows or highlights. Instead of me purchasing eyeshadows and highlighters and things like that, I could have just used what I had on deck instead of wasting more of my money on products that were very similar to what I already have. But now that I am older and wiser, I work with what I have. If there's something in the house that we need, then we sit on it and we think of like, okay, why do we need this product? Can we work with what we have before buying this particular product? Realizing you don't need to follow the crowd. Once I realized that I don't need to be a copy and paste version of everybody else around me or celebrities, it felt really good knowing that I was getting comfortable in my own skin. I went in debt back then trying to be like everybody else. I did the school thing. I tried to do pharmacy tech. I went in debt $15,000 with that because I seen all the other girls that I was hanging out with. They were CNAs, they were doing their thing, and I was like, all right, maybe I should try to do something. When in reality, I'm not good at school and I'm good at other things, just not school. And I chose to be in the medical field because everybody else was in it, and I ended up having to pay all of that debt without a degree. So that was a huge lesson I learned. But it wasn't the first lesson. Once when I realized that, okay, I don't need to do that. I don't need to be like these people. I don't need to be looking like celebrities and stuff. I can be Kira. It really changed the game for me when it came to confidence, when it came to feeling happy to be me for once. You know, when you try to be like other people, you tend to get lost in the mix. You lose yourself. I was almost close to losing who I was. I mean, I don't like to listen to the same genre of music all the time. Everybody I was hanging out with was listening to hip hop, and I'm like, I like hip hop, but I also like rock, and I also like jazz and blues, and I like other genres. I don't want to just listen to one thing every day. And I think a little bit of me suffered back then because a part of me that loved different kind of genres and loved different kind of movies was hidden, and I almost lost that part of me, and I'm glad that I snapped out of it and got back to myself. So I think out of his whole entire list, saving money is great. Living with less things is great, but the number one thing that kind of really changed my whole entire life out of this list is the fact that I became very, very comfortable with just being me. If you would have told me 11, 12 years ago that I would be online in front of thousands and thousands of people with no makeup on, I would have been like,
yeah, right, no way.
Like, I was that type of girl to not leave the house without a full face of makeup because I seen everybody else doing it. So needless to say, I'm extremely thankful and grateful that I snapped out of that dimension and came back to reality for myself. Let me know down below what changed your life, whether it's 10 things, 5, or maybe it's just one thing that happened that changed your life forever. It's incredible and how true that saying is, the older you get, the wiser you get. Because back then I would be like, yeah, okay. And now that I'm in my 30s, I'm like, all right, this saying is very, very true. Even though I have a lot more to learn about life, I'm very happy that I have a nice grip on my life right now. So with that all being said, I will catch you guys in the next video.